Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to Gear Tasting Radio, where we offer an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I am joined today by Rob Henderson.
Hello.
And I am Brian Black, and today we are talking hydration and purification. So everybody in the great outdoors has to carry water in some shape or form, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Some methods for carrying water, some things that we prefer, and then also some ways to treat water if you are outside and you have to gather it, and some best practices for that. So
it's like the one thing you have to have.
Yes.
We can guarantee you have to have water.
Well, it goes back to that whole rule of threes thing.
Yep.
You can, survive 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, and 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. I think if I got that
right. So I
right.
guess you could do a short overnight trip without water, but
possibly
not recommended.
You would be thirsty.
Yes, definitely.
So water is very important, and that's why we are going to focus on it so much today.
Mm-hmm.
I have, personally, from my experience, I've probably been using hydration bladders in some shape or form for the better part of 15 years now, maybe.
Yeah.
It all started with Camelback, and that's kind of where I first started using hydration bladders. Camelback was kind of the only place really around back then.
It's almost becoming like the Kleenex of hydration bladders.
And I'm skeptical, or I'm hesitant to say that they invented the hydration bladder. Don't quote me on that though, but I feel like everything kind of came from Camelback, and other companies found ways to improve on the idea of a hydration bladder, and that's kind of where we're at today.
Yep.
So going back to Camelback, they first had kind of the idea of a flexible bladder and an opening fill port that you could use to put water into, and then you seal it back up, and it's got a pressure type fitting waterproof seal on it. So once you seal it back up, you would then put it in a backpack or something like that, and then you would drink your water through a hose, and that hose has some kind of shut-off valve or something to stop the water from flowing.
Yeah, not just an open tube.
Right, and then it's kind of an on-demand system, meaning you open the valve and then you suck out the water, basically. So when Camelback first came around, they, in my opinion, this is solely from my usage with old Camelback products, and I really have not given them a fair shake lately because I'm just so stuck on source hydration bladders, which I'll get to in a second. But I had issues with Camelback bladders leaking in the beginning. I always found myself cussing at them when it came time to clean them and things like that.
Sure.
So basically the way that would work is you'd open the fill port, you'd somewhat be able to get something inside to clean it with. They weren't antimicrobial, so you had to worry.
Grungy film.
Yeah, so you got a grunge on it. And just a tip, don't ever put anything in your hydration bladder that's not water.
Yeah.
That's a big lesson learned that I learned very early on in my hydration
Unless you're ready to
days.
be done with that bladder.
Right.
Yeah.
Because evidently, or in some usage, you are going to have something that sticks in the bladder. Even though some of these newer things are antimicrobial and everything, there's a taste variable in there too. And that's one thing that plagued Camelback early on, is they had just a horrible taste.
That funk.
With the water that came in their bladders. And there were some other bladder manufacturers that came around, I know Blackhawk started making their Hydrostorm version of a Camelback, and that was probably late 90s and early 2000s, something like that. They were making that stuff, and it was a competitor to Camelback. And then Source came around, and I want to say they started in the early 2000s, maybe 2007-ish.
I was gonna guess
like
07 or 08.
Yeah,
that would
something
be my
like
guess.
that. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to research that because I am interested now too.
There's a giant asterisk on this episode.
Yeah, now that we're talking times. But
yeah.
So what Source did is they solved a lot of the problems that Camelback had early on. Well, I think they really did come up with a product that I feel like has really taken the hydration bladder to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and Camelback, to their credit, did come out with some of these things to try to take out some of the things that were causing them issues. Like they changed the fill port to enlarge it so you can actually get your whole hand in there, but you're still dealing with, putting your hand through an opening to clean it.
Right.
And then they also had a quick disconnect type bladder, or what do you call it? Bite valve.
Yeah.
But that was really, in the early ones that I have, it was always just a huge pain in the butt to get it off. Like it's just,
I'm watching you.
I mean, I'm sitting here messing with one and I still can't get it
Not
off.
successful.
Right. So those are the things that kind of caused me to stop using Camelback whenever Source came out. So when I saw what Source was doing, I was like, oh man, that is revolutionary. I'm definitely jumping in that bandwagon. They've solved so many problems. So they were able to make a bladder that had an opening at the top, so kind of a pressure fitting, and they had a big opening. I don't really know what they call it, but do you remember what they call this opening?
I think it's like the wide valve.
It's kind of like a wide opening at the top, and it's held on by this.
It's such a good idea. I've seen several it's
hard to describe in words.
Yeah, if you've had like a waterproof electronics bag, I've seen some of those do the same type of closure, but it's like a fold-over closure with like
a sliding bar.
And it holds it really, really well. I mean, once you see it, you're like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, it does hold it well too, and you would think that having a large opening in this, you would cause leaking and stuff, but it really doesn't. I mean, you can stand on one of these Source bladders and it won't push water through that.
Yeah.
But then it's also got the easy open fill port. And basically the screw top that it has is dummy corded, which I'm a huge fan of dummy cord, as you guys know. I don't like the potential of losing anything in the field, and for the cap and even the slide bar that has the big opening to be dummy corded is big in my book. As well as the actual bite valve has a cover on it that's dummy corded to the hose,
which is super nice. If you put your pack down and the nozzle goes in the dirt,
right? So it's a way to protect and to have a cap over the nozzle so it doesn't get dirt and stuff on it. But then what they also did is they put in these quick disconnects, so you can quickly disconnect the hydration tube from the bladder itself. So let's say you have the hydration tube, and this is the way most people run these. You've got them routed through a backpack, sometimes routed through a shoulder strap, and you've got stuff tying it down so it doesn't get in the way when you're hiking and stuff. So it can be a huge pain to have to undo all that stuff to fill a bladder back up when you empty it. So that's where the quick disconnect comes in handy, is you can quickly disconnect the hose from the bladder, pull the bladder out of your pack, refill it, whether that's through the fill port or the large opening at the top, and then put it back in your bag, hook it all back up. And even when the hose is disconnected, it's a one-way valve, so it's got a check on it so that water is not going to come through there when you quick disconnect it, which is awesome.
It's magic.
Yeah. And then even the bite valves on some of the versions of this, so specifically we're looking at the WXP 3-liter. That's the version we're talking about from Source. And some of them even have a quick disconnect on the bite valve, so you can take the bite valve off and quickly disconnect it and swap it. Let's say in the instance that you broke a bite valve and you need to replace it quickly, you don't have to replace the whole hose. You can just carry a spare bite valve on you. And that's something that can be a hindrance or a help. So I competed in the Man with Sniper Challenge a couple years back, and I was using a Source bladder, and I actually had this quick disconnect on me in the field, and I didn't even know it. So the bite valve fell off, and I was able to notice for some ungodly reason, because this is all I had. Like I didn't have a backup water bladder. I didn't have, and usually I'm always like a Mr. 2 is 1, 1 is none, and I've always got backups of everything. But I did not have a spare bite valve, and I literally looked down at my feet, and it was right there. So I don't know how I got lucky, but so they do make models of the WXP 3-liter that don't have a quick disconnect on the actual bite valve itself, but they do have one on the hose to the body. So that might be the best version, just depending on what your preference is. But
and I like that too, because they make a connector piece or an accessory that you can mount. And I think you did a video years ago about filling it using that. It's like a little green.
Yeah, I hate that thing.
Yeah, I've never gotten it to work right, except with like water bottles and stuff. But there is the option, if you were like wearing your gear and you don't want to take it off to fill, you could use a hose or a water bottle. Not super successfully from what I have seen. But
so what Rob is mentioning is that you can use the quick disconnect on this to put on a fill adapter to where the bite valve goes into, if you have the version with the quick disconnect right on the bite valve. And it looks like you can actually fill from water bottles or a hose spigot or something like that. You can hook this little adapter, which is kind of a rubberized fitting, directly to a water bottle, and you can basically push water back into the bladder to fill it without even having to take the bladder part out of your pack, which is in theory it's awesome, but in practice I've had mixed results with that for sure. So
definitely,
but that is available if anyone's interested out there. And so when we're talking hydration bladders, I do feel like Source is still the best thing on the market, and they've held that position in my mind for years now. There's been other things that have come along, and I've just never really been super happy with anything I've seen. Granted, I don't do a lot of research still into hydration bladders because
once you get one that works,
you know, it's tough, and I do need to do a better job of seeing kind of what's on the market still today. But as far as what I've seen, this is still kind of the be-all, end-all. And so until I see something else, that's what I would recommend to anybody searching for a water bladder. Plus, I've never had a leak with one.
No.
So I've never had one fail on me, and I've probably got 3 of these 3-liter bladders, and I've been swapping between them and cycling them out for at least 5 years, if not more, and I've never had any issues with them leaking. I've stood on them before for demos of showing people that it doesn't leak, and I've just never had one fail on me. So
I don't think I've ever officially cleaned mine either.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably not a good thing, but I just wash them out.
Well, they are, and particularly the Source 3-liter is coated with antimicrobial technology. So technically you shouldn't have to.
So, I mean, I've just, every time I go camping or something, I'll wash it out with like hot water, and then I'll fill it, and I get no taste, no funk, none of that slimy gunk you'll get from other cheaper bladders or different bladders.
Yeah, so that's a method, and what I also like if you did have to clean it is that you can get your whole hand inside there from the top port, and you don't have to use some funky brush and this is like an old brush that I have that's left over from, using different hydration bladders.
Huge pipe cleaner.
Yeah, it looks like a big pipe cleaner, and you used to have to do that kind of crap, and
I think the only thing I have on a wish list for them, I don't know about you, but like I don't think I've ever opened this on mine. I just always divert to like pulling that off and filling. So if they made one that was just like clear, like smooth, I would probably buy that one.
So the thing that I like about having the option of filling from the fill port or this large top opening is that when you're filling from the fill port, it's got a little handle that you can actually hold. And if you are truly trying to be hands free while you're filling it, it can be a help to be able to hold it with one hand and control whatever you're filling with the other.
Especially if you were standing and like pouring a bottle or something.
And I do typically fill from the top because it's super simple. I make sure I kind of wipe down that seal before I fold it over because when water gets in there, it breaks the seal a little bit and you can be more susceptible to leaking if that happens. But even though I've had times where I've never wiped that down and still sealed it and it's been fine, but that's just a caveat I want to mention. But so in terms of hydration bladders, that's what I wanted to cover specifically. And then when you move into different water containers, the hydration bladder is always an option. So that's, if you have a backpack, that can typically be the best way to carry water with you. And one of these 100-liter bladders typically weighs about 7 pounds full. So that's just a metric to keep in mind because water is freaking heavy. That's just the nature of it. So
I really don't like filling it all the way full. Just because of how heavy it does get.
And typically if I've got a backpack too, sometimes I'll opt not to take a hydration bladder and take 2 Nalgene's or something like that. So between that's 64 ounces. It's not quite 100, obviously. So you're carrying less water, but Nalgene's sometimes afford a better method for drinking water on the go because you can grab one out of a backpack, especially if you've got pockets in your backpack that you can access while you're wearing the pack. That can be a great way to kind of drink on the go too. And I highly recommend, I don't think I have any in these Nalgene samples that we have here, but there's these splash guard inserts. There's one. So that is the company, Splash Guard. And I highly recommend these inserts that go into there. So basically what it does is it prevents you from drinking through a big wide opening like a Nalgene's got. And that's one of my big hiccups with Nalgene is I love them, but sometimes if I don't have one of these inserts, I wind up sloshing it all over myself, especially if you're trying to drink water on the go. Like you're hiking, you pull out an Nalgene, you go to drink, and you don't have one of those splash guards, it can be a problem. So highly recommend those. It's like a little rubber insert. But so Nalgene's are a great option. There's also vapor bottles. I like vapor bottles. It's like a little collapsible water bottle, and they can really fit down into a very small footprint. So what can be great about those is when you're done drinking out of them, they collapse. And why that's important is that if you're if you're kind of hurting for room in a pack, it can be good to collapse a water bottle down and gain space back. Whereas with a hard-sided Nalgene container, you can never gain that space back. You could always put something in the container when you're done with it, but you never really want to do that.
Well, and you run into the same thing you run into kind of with the bladders. It's like you don't want to put anything in the Nalgene. Contaminate your water.
Exactly. And I'm the same way with anything. I like to just put water in my Nalgene. I like to just put water in my vapor bottle. It doesn't matter what I'm using. I'm just not a big fan of mixing things and making some kind of sticky solution inside of whatever.
Yeah, so I have 3 Nalgene bottles that now taste like whiskey. Because we put whiskey in them at muster.
That's right. I forgot about that.
I forgot about them too.
We broke our own rule.
Yeah, and I recently found them when I was clearing gear out.
That's when we were doing Whiskey Land.
They still had some in it, and so those are. I've tried cleaning them several times. It's a couple dishwasher cycles. You still get. Oh yeah, they're.
Oh man,
it's like a whiskey barrel now in the way it tastes. But hey, whiskey tasting water probably isn't the worst thing.
That's
ever.
why we use your Nalgene.
Yeah, exactly.
Not my Nalgene. But yeah, so source. Good for hydration. Nalgene, good for a hard-sided container. Vapor bottles are good for a soft-sided, flexible, collapsible container. And those are kind of my main 3. So if I were to give you an option for different kind of water containers, I would choose these.
Yeah. And I'll usually have a bladder in the pack, like you said, as just kind of a backup. But like when I'm camping, I like to take multiple Nalgenes.
Yep.
Because it's just so much easier to just drink out of an Nalgene, and then when you're done, you just put it, if you're in a vehicle or whatever. But I also like having different containers, so I'm not all in on like one big water container that gets knocked over or something. And so.
Yeah, and hopefully there's always a place to fill water from.
Right.
And that's where we can kind of talk about the next step, which is gathering water too. So if you're gathering water from a source, a good rule for that, and I always follow this, is that if you can gather water from a running stream or source of some kind. Now, I'm not talking about turning on a hose spigot and filling it. That's different. That's more than likely treated already from the city's water plant, and you shouldn't have to worry about treating that kind of water. But if you're gathering water out in nature, you always want to choose a running water source if possible, because there's less chance for some of the big 3 to attach to that. And so the big 3, when we're talking about contaminants that can possibly mess with your water, those are pathogens. So you've got protozoa, you've got bacteria, and you've got viruses, and all those things are important when it comes into treating your water. And I would say the vast majority of water treatment methods out there just treat protozoa and bacteria. So they only touch 2 out of the 3. Now, viruses aren't found too much in the United States, so you don't technically have to worry too much about viruses, but like hepatitis A and rotavirus are nothing to screw around with.
Well, I was going to say, it's like, that's one of those like 0.99% chance things, and it's like, there's always a chance.
And then, a caveat too is even the best water filter will never claim to be 100%. They'll always claim 99.9%, effective against whatever bacteria and protozoa. So some examples of protozoa would be Giardia or Giardia, however you say that, and then Cryptosporidium. And then bacteria-wise, you've got things like E. coli and then the old dysentery. So if you're on the Oregon Trail, you could die of dysentery if you don't
and that's
treat
nothing
your water.
To mess around with. I mean, those are some hardcore things that you can get from bad water. I mean, there's a reason why everybody talks about when you travel internationally and stuff to check your water sources and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's never a bad idea to carry a water filter and purification methods when you go international too, especially down to Mexico. But so those are the big things to worry about when you're talking about water treatment and purification. And, like I said, most developed communities will always be treating water, so it's perfectly fine to drink tap water. Some people freak out about tap water, but I drink tap water all day long. I drink tap water all the time. Yeah. But so if you run into the situation where you have a water purification method or a filter, so let's break this down even still. So you've got mechanical filtration, you've got chemical filtration. Those are kind of the 2 methods that you can treat water with. So mechanical filtration would be like a pump or a filter or something.
Like you're running it through an object.
Yes, so that's mechanical filtration, whereas chemical filtration would be a drop or a tab or something that's dissolving into the water chemically to treat it. And then there's like the SteriPen, which is ultraviolet, and I don't really know where that fits into the whole thing.
You tickle the water.
So, you kind of tickle the water, and then it's automatically safe to drink.
Done.
So, And I don't know a whole lot about SteriPen because I've just never really felt good about using ultraviolet light to treat water. And I know that ultraviolet light is used all over the world to treat water, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's a bad method. I've never really wanted to depend on something with batteries and a pen and ultraviolet light to treat water.
Well, and there's a technique behind it too.
Yeah.
So it's like you're having to like learn a step of how to do it versus like what we're talking about with mechanical, pour it in one side, take it out the other, or a chemical, put it in and follow their directions.
Yeah, and mechanical filtration can always fail too. There's moving parts and there's things that can break, but I don't like relying on batteries for things like filtering water. So that's why I stay away from the thing like the SteriPen. It's just personal. But one thing I've found in the last few years is gravity filters, and I'm a huge fan of gravity filters. And again, this is a situation where it's only going to treat protozoa and bacteria. It's not going to treat viruses. But I have found for a large group setting that basically a gravity-fed filter works really good for that. So one that I like is this one from Platypus. This is a Gravity Works filter, and it is a mechanical filtration method. So you've got a large dirty water bag, and it's pushing or gravity feeding through and moving through the filter into a clean water bag. And then you take that clean water bag, and now you've got a large container of clean water that you can distribute to multiple people or fill your Nalgene from because it's got a Nalgene adapter and things like that too. So there's a lot of benefits to a filtration method like this when it comes to large groups. So anytime I'm backpacking with a large group or something, I'll typically take one of these, and even we'll try to split up the weight. One person can carry something, and it's never a really good idea to split up a water filter though, because then if somebody wanders off, now your water filter is gone, and that type of thing. But that's another subject about distributing weight.
Well, and something else I was going to mention is a lot of people default to like, I'm just going to boil water, which sounds great in theory until you actually get out there and you look at the size of your containers to boil and realize like how much time it's going to take to boil the amount of water you need, especially for a group.
And there's plenty of hacks out there to boil water, even in like a plastic drinking bottle, but the time that it's going to take to build a fire, to get a pot or a container to boil water in, and granted, it's a foolproof method. So if you want to get rid of all three of those things that we talked about, all three pathogens, boil it, and you won't have anything to worry about. But you do have something to worry about because you got to wait for the water to cool down too, because you can't drink boiling water. So there's a bunch of different variables at play when you're talking about boiling water, and things that I think are better to invest in a good system to filter water. I like a combination of both, and that's what I was kind of getting to, is that I like mechanically treating water to remove the 99.9% of protozoa and bacteria, and then I like to follow up with a treatment directly for virus in the form of drops or tablets. So when you're talking about treating for virus, in my opinion, Aquamira drops are one of the best things out there. They also make tabs, which are perfect for like little mini survival kits and things like that. But if you've got the option to take what you want, the drops are by far the best thing that you can get for treating virus. And what I'll do too is if I'm going to run something like this gravity filter, I will take the dirty water, I'll condense it down into the clean water, and then I'll treat it with the Aquamira drops just to get rid of any chance of virus too. And you never really want to be treating water in like something like a hydration bladder either if you can get away with it, treating it elsewhere. I mean, yes, you may just be limited to being able to put water in there, but one of the best things you can do, like I said, is to gather water from a flowing water source because you're less likely to get contaminants in it. There's more chance for viruses and other kinds of things from standing water. So you want to really try to avoid standing water if you can, and always pump from or gather from a flowing source. So that's kind of number one. And then number two, if you've got water that you're gathering and it's still from a dirty location, you can kind of use the old mechanical filtration method of like putting a t-shirt over something to get rid of the sediment that's coming through it too. So that's kind of a pre-filter almost in itself, because sometimes the water can be so nasty and dirty that you don't want to necessarily just put that water in a container and then...
Yeah, I mean, the dirt's not going to kill you, but it's not going to taste good.
Yeah, you don't want to filter. I mean, a filter is supposed to remove that kind of stuff, but it never removes everything. So the cleaner the water can be, that's just a kind of a good rule to live by.
Well, like you said, a T-shirt can get out leaves and sticks and other things that you could just filter out really quickly.
Right. So, and that can be as simple as like throwing a T-shirt over the top of your nalgene and dumping water into it. You always want to make sure, though, a little tip here, if you're treating water in a nalgene, you always want to make sure you invert the nalgene and open it up a little so that whatever treatment method you're using, let's say you're using drops, like I put Aquamira drops into my nalgene and I'm letting it sit. You always want to invert the nalgene and open the threads a little bit so that the threads and the water that are around the threads get treated too, and then close it back up. So
definitely.
That's a big tip that I want to share too.
Because it could get trapped in the threads. That's a great point.
And that goes for, a hydration bladder threads.
Anything with threads, basically.
Exactly.
Cool.
So, so when you're talking about treating for viruses with either drops or tablets, the time variable is the biggest thing that is a benefit to the drops, because the tablets take 4 hours, and that's a long time to wait for water.
Yeah.
So that's why they're really good for a survival kit and not necessarily great for, just your average everyday. I'm gonna go backpack and gather water because I know there's all these sources around.
Right.
You really don't want to rely on tablets to do that. You want to rely on drops, because the drops, there's basically a premix that you mix up with the drops. And when you combine A to B and you make this premix, I think it has to sit for about 5 minutes.
Whoa.
And then depending on how cold or turbid, which means movement, the water is, it can be anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. So max time you could be down of not having water could be 35 minutes. And that doesn't count the time
than 4 hours.
Yeah, and that doesn't count the time it took you to actually gather the water or to pump it first through mechanical or feed it through a gravity filter. Anything that you're going to do to kind of mechanically treat it before the water treatment drops, it doesn't include that. But, Aquamira in itself, it says here on the package that it's effective against bacteria, viruses, and cysts, such as Cryptosporidium giardia. So, you've got your protozoa, you've got your bacteria, and you've got your virus right here. So it's kind of an all-in-one. But like I said, if you just rely on treatment drops, you're not getting rid of the crap that's in the water.
Yeah, like sediment.
Right,
things
exactly.
Like that.
So that's where the filter comes into play, and that's why I like doing both methods.
You can't be overly cautious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when it comes to treating water, yes, could you drink water right out of a crappy source and live for a while until you get to help? Yeah, absolutely. But you're going to eventually develop something that's going to screw with you for multiple days, and why risk it? If you can be prepared, be prepared. If it's a true survival emergency situation, that's another story altogether. But if you've got the means to put this kind of stuff together beforehand, it can help you immensely. So, hopefully this has given you some ideas and options. Mechanical filter, I mean, we talked a little bit about that, but the Katadyn Hiker is probably one of the best mechanical pump type filters out there. I like it because it's got a little float almost that you can put into the water to gather from. So you don't have to hold down. It almost floats on the top of the water for gathering. It's kind of a neat
cool.
system. And then you've got, a lot of people talk about the Lifestraw, but
I've seen that a lot recently.
So again, think about that from the perspective of what we talked about. So it is a mechanical filtration. So as you're drinking water through the straw, it's pulling it through that mechanical filter, which is good. And I'm sure hopefully they advertise that it treats 99.9% of, protozoa and bacteria.
Right.
But you're not getting that viral protection at all by drinking through a Lifestraw. So that's just a little heads up. And I like to always just be over-prepared. And
like you said, 2 is 1, 1 is none.
Yeah.
2 filtration methods is going to help you overall.
Yeah. So hopefully you learned something. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them our way. And that has been our discussion on hydration and filtration. Thanks for checking out Gear Tasting Radio. Remember, if you have any questions, use the pound tag Gear Tasting, and we will try to field them here on future episodes of Gear Tasting Radio, which come out every Tuesday. So fresh episodes every Tuesday. And if you like what we're doing, hopefully you already found us on Apple Podcasts. But if not, we're on there, and we'd love for you to subscribe on there. And if you like what we're doing, leave us a little rating and review. We'd love to know what you think about the show. And if it's not a 5-star review, let us know why. Send us an email to support@itstactical.com. Let us know what we can do to improve the show. We're always looking for feedback. Or leave a comment if you're watching this in video format on YouTube. Let us know what we can do better. So we definitely value feedback all the time, and it's what helps us grow as a show. So, and plus, if we can get that rating spiked up higher in Apple Podcasts, it helps us to be seen by other people searching for podcasts, so it definitely helps the podcast if you could do us that favor. So if it's not a 5-star, let us know.
Yeah.
Please. Anyway, also, if you like what we're doing here on Gear Tasting Radio, we have a Patreon channel, so patreon.com/ITSTactical. If you choose to support us through Patreon for a couple bucks a month, we've got some good stuff to give you in return, so please consider checking that out as well, and thanks for listening.